Imagine the queen draped in silk, jewels glittering, a vision of divine majesty. Now imagine the smell. Behind the gold and pearls lurked habits so foul, servants whispered that demons must dwell in the royal bedchamber. Medieval queens weren't bathing beauties, they were living cautionary tales of rot, perfume, and paranoia. From chamber pots dumped out windows to bizarre beauty rituals that could peel skin from bone, these women terrified everyone, forced to scrub their sheets. Tonight, we peel back the curtains of velvet to reveal the stench hiding in history's most noble bedrooms. The bathless brides. Now, let's start with the smell that never left the room. Queens, those shimmering symbols of divine grace, avoided baths like the plague. Literally, they believed water opened the pores and invited sickness, so scrubbing with soap was practically heresy. Instead, they wore layers of fabric like medieval hazmat suits, trapping every ounce of sweat, grease, and food residue against their skin. Imagine months of feasting on venison and mead with no bath in sight. Servants swore the scent could make a stable reek smell refreshing. To mask it, they doused themselves in oils, herbs, and enough perfume to suffocate a goat. But peel back the layers of velvet, and you'd find a body marinating in its own juices. One queen even boasted she hadn't bathed in a year, an achievement that nearly killed her laundresses. Court poets sang of purity and virtue, but behind closed doors, dressing the queen was less a ceremony and more a battlefield. And the servants? They weren't praying for blessings, they were praying for working nostrils to fail. The chamber pot catastrophe. If the stench of the queen's body didn't knock you flat, the royal plumbing certainly would. Forget marble bathrooms. Her Majesty's throne was often a wooden chair with a hole in it, a chamber pot tucked neatly beneath. And when it filled, well, that's what servants were for. They lugged buckets of royal waste down corridors, sloshing like a grotesque water feature, only to dump it straight out the nearest window. Imagine strolling through town in your best tunic and suddenly splat. A gift from the queen herself, raining down from above. Some chamber pots weren't even emptied daily. They'd fester under royal beds, stewing in the summer heat until the curtains reeked like open sewers. There were even attendants whose entire job was tending to Her Majesty's bowels. Career advancement was literally measured in buckets of piss. The irony? Queens dined like gods on sugared almonds and spiced venison, but their leftovers made the streets smell like hell. And the poor servant at ground zero? Let's just say they didn't need prayers, they needed nose plugs and therapy. Perfume as warfare. Of course, when you refuse to bathe and your chamber pot doubles as an air freshener, there's only one weapon left: perfume. Queens didn't just spritz, they practically baptized themselves in the stuff. Musk ripped from the scent glands of civet cats, ambergris scraped from whale guts, and enough rose oil to drown a monastery. The result? Rooms so thick with stench that courtiers choked, sneezed, and stumbled around like they'd been gassed. Servants sent to adjust gowns often came back with watering eyes, claiming they'd rather muck stables than inhale another wave of royal fragrance. Worse still, the perfumes didn't mask the filth they mixed with it. Imagine sweat, mildew, and animal musk fusing into a smell strong enough to singe a knight's mustache. Poets rhapsodized about queens being sweet as lilies, but the jest among servants was different. Lilies smelled better. One quip passed through court. Why arm the battlements when one whiff of Her Majesty could drop an enemy army in their tracks? Rotten teeth, royal breath. If the queen's perfume didn't suffocate you, her smile might finish the job. Medieval queens loved sugar, candied fruits, honeyed wines, and almonds drowned in syrup. They devoured sweets like children at a fair, with no toothbrush in sight. The result? Teeth blackened to stumps, gums swelling like raw meat, and abscesses that could rot the jaw. Their smiles were fewer pearls, more gravestones. Servants unlucky enough to hold scented clothes before her mouth, while audiences swore it was like inhaling straight from a corpse's lungs. Yet poets still waxed on about lips like rosebuds. Sure, if those buds had been dunked in vinegar and left in a graveyard, lovers who kissed the queen weren't savouring romance. They were gambling with sepsis. At court, whispers grew. Perhaps her breath wasn't human at all, but dragon fire cloaked in rouge. And the bitterest irony? While she devoured sugar to flaunt her wealth, her servants spent their wages on herbs just to survive standing near her. Bloodletting for beauty. And then came beauty, at least, the medieval definition of it. To be pale was to be powerful, so queens willingly drained themselves of blood like overripe wineskins. Leeches were applied to cheeks, arms, and even eyelids, sucking until their skin turned ghostly white. Servants collected the slimy creatures in jars, only to reuse them on other treatments. As if that wasn't ghastly enough, queens smeared pigeon droppings on their faces to chase away blemishes, or slathered concoctions of vinegar and lead to achieve that coveted corpse-like glow. The irony? These rituals meant to preserve beauty often left blistered skin, peeling flesh, and infections that stank worse than the chamber pots. By candlelight, she shimmered with pale elegance. Up close, she resembled something halfway between a saint and a cadaver. Servants who painted on her makeup knew the truth. They weren't beautifying their queen, they were embalming her alive. And still, nobles bowed in awe, mistaking rot for radiance. Bedding that could kill the queen's bed was supposed to be paradise. Towering frames, embroidered silks, furs layered like a winter fortress. But step closer, and you'd hear the scratching. Queens rarely changed their sheets, sometimes not for months. Parasites thrived in the warmth, lice nesting in the pillows, fleas swarming the blankets, and the occasional rat joining the royal slumber party. Servants tasked with stripping the bed emerged, looking like they'd wrestled a hedgehog, their arms covered in bites and rashes. One queen insisted her sheets were never to be washed, claiming the body purified itself. Spoiler alert, it did not. The stench of sweat, rot, and vermin turned the chamber into something between a plague ward and a barn. Meanwhile, peasants, those mud-covered masses, often smelled cleaner, since straw pallets got replaced far more often than royal silks. In a cruel twist, the very beds meant to display luxury became death traps, crawling with invisible armies. Sleeping with the queen wasn't romantic, it was a medical hazard. Deathbed stench of royalty. If life with a queen smelled like misery, death was the encore no one wanted tickets for. When queens finally expired, their bodies were laid out in grand display, perfumed and garlanded for mourning. But embalming was more art than science, and often more failure than success. In sweltering summer heat, corpses swelled like grotesque balloons. Coffins burst open with sickening cracks, spraying fluids across cathedral floors, while horrified servants scrambled with rags and sand to mop up royal remains. The stench was legendary, thick enough to turn incense into a joke, overpowering flowers meant to mask the rot. Yet rituals demanded nobles still approach the body, bow, even kiss the remains. Servants whispered that hell wasn't fire, it was being trapped in a chapel with a decomposing queen in July. The final irony. Queens spent their lives drowning themselves in perfume, only to be remembered most vividly for their last, unforgettable odor. Their legacy wasn't majesty, it was miasma. So next time you picture a medieval queen, don't imagine sparkling gowns and fairy tale castles. Imagine a woman marinating in sweat, brushing her teeth with honeyed wine, and sleeping in a bed that doubled as a flea circus. Her perfume wasn't roses, it was a chemical weapon of whale guts and musk. Her smile wasn't dazzling, it was a dental crime scene. And through it all, her servants endured every stench, every bucket, every nightmare ritual, praying for their noses to give up entirely. Queens may have ruled kingdoms, but their hygiene ruled their households with terror. In the end, history's true warriors weren't knights on horseback. They were the poor souls scrubbing sheets, hauling chamber pots, and surviving the stink of power.